Hey Rigo, let's take a look at your week 2 assignment 3 drawing. I don't notice the excuse me, I don't really notice the bleeding all that much within the drawing. There's a few areas, maybe this is where some of the bleeding occurs, where some of the edges tend to be a little bit rougher than what I guess we're used to seeing when we see your drawings, but I don't think in any case it's that big of a deal. The composition as a whole, I think, is very good. There's a couple things I want to kind of mention, but I think all the good stuff is there's good color variation in place. You've got, the nice kind of variance in color for the brick. The wood texture is showing some good changes in value and in color. You're working with some of the textural elements, I think, nicely here, although I think you could maybe introduce a little bit more color into the stone. And the chrome textures are working out really well, just as they were in the last assignment. Dealing with the background, dealing with the ground plane is also a bonus for me. I think the background color needs to be toned down a little bit. It's a very, very stark black, and I think it ends up really drawing in a lot of attention because of just how dark it is. I think a 20% gray, 40% gray would work out fine. I think if you have like a neutral tone that's very light in value, that would work out fine. But you don't want to have the background in any way taking away from the main series of elements, and I think that it starts to. The other big part of it is that there's a lot of paper white in these areas, and so they contrast with the black a lot, and that's kind of intensifying the focus on it. The other kind of thing I just wanted to mention was that when you're going in and doing kind of laying in these cast shadows, you can lay in the color of the ground plane just throughout the entirety of the ground plane, and then just go in over top of it with a gray. And what's going to happen is you'll have a little bit of that blue showing up through the gray, which is what a real shadow would do anyway. You'll get that translucency, and you won't have kind of this odd and slightly jarring change in value and in color where it goes from blue and then it just makes this big kind of switch to a completely neutral gray. So there has to be a little bit of color integration into that, and the markers do a really good job of that because they're transparent, and if you give enough time to dry with the blue, you should just be able to go in with the gray on top of it without any kind of ill effects overall. I think some textures, I think you can try and bring out the wood grain a little bit more in the wood. I think for the brick, you can try and create a little bit more roughness with the texture. The wood one for me, I think, is the one that's could work a little bit better rather than the brick, because I think the color is really spot on the brick. But the wood one, I think, getting some of that grain to show up just a little bit more, reinforcing it maybe with some colored pencil, can help to bring it out more. The value thing is also still a little bit tricky for me because it makes such a quick transition from light to dark, but I think it doesn't feel as apparent as it did in the last assignment, which I think is definitely a good thing. It's a good job overall. I think the coloring for me is the thing that I like the most. I like the blue and the reds and the oranges. I think introducing a little more color into the other elements, maybe a few neutrals into the stone, maybe a few of the environmental colors into the chrome, especially maybe getting some of that blue that's here into some of the chrome so that it feels like reflective in that way. Maybe getting a little bit of the red into the chrome on the cylinder to suggest that it is also kind of being affected by the environment around it can help to make it feel more realistic, and also just to get more color into some of these more neutral shapes. But it is a solid job overall, and we'll just say to keep it up and keep up the really, really good work overall.